Brazil always delivers. Can we just all agree that Interlagos is the best racetrack of the year every year? It has everything. The track allows for overtaking, the weather mixes up the weekend, and it has incredible fans with a rich history in Formula One. My favourite race weekend of the season. So let's go through it all. My 3 winners and 3 losers from the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. My first winner's maybe the most obvious pick I've ever had to make. It has to be Mercedes. Those silver cars have had to be so incredibly patient all season long, picking up the pieces when Red Bull and Ferrari have made mistakes along the way, sticking in there and trying to build off of their incredible consistency and reliability, it has to be said. But it's been a very long road for them in 2022. Many upgrades haven't quite worked, many races have been so incredibly close, but they finally have their first win of the season, and on top of that, it's a 1-2 on pace in Brazil. The Mercedes car just was the fastest car in Brazil. It's been an incredible season-long story for the team, but to zoom in on Brazil in particular, both drivers drove incredibly well. Let's talk about George, who won both the sprint race and went on to win the Grand Prix, leading from the front, which is trickier than it sounds. He's had a few tough weekends recently. He's been under some criticism for his driving in the latter stages of the season, remember? So once he got himself out in front and had a couple of seconds gap to the field behind, the pressure starts to build. I was nervous for him sitting here watching, let alone the adrenaline he is feeling in that car. There's an expectation that once you're in the lead in a Mercedes car in particular, you go on to win, but he still had a long way to go. We've seen drivers this year make mistakes leading Grand Prix, but George looked really calm and really comfortable. He kept a level head and even dictated the strategy to the team from the cockpit. Even with a late safety car, he got that gap again and just put in fast lap after fast lap to get the job done. We all know that George was held onto by Mercedes for a good reason, and this race just shows everything that they need him to do now that he's in that top team. And it also shows that he has the mentality to battle with the likes of Hamilton, Verstappen and Leclerc for seasons to come. Because not only was it an incredible weekend for the Briton, but George Russell is also set to outscore Lewis Hamilton in his first season at Mercedes. I'm incredibly inspired by the Mercedes team over the course of the season so far, and I'm very excited to see what they can bring in 2023. Our first losers, though, with their toughest weekend in a long time, has to be Red Bull. Let's talk about the racing first, as this is the first race since the summer break that they haven't won. There is a lot to delve into here, but let's start with the cars on the track, because this is one of the few races where Max Verstappen has actually looked mortal in this second half of the season. Obviously, there was the mistake in Singapore, but this felt very different because the Red Bull was not obviously the fastest car on track in Brazil. Let's not forget that after qualifying, Max was starting in second place, and Sergio Perez for the sprint was starting in ninth, thanks to Charles Leclerc's aggressive defending in qualifying from his championship rival. But Max only had a Haas in front of him, and everyone, including me and Max, I think, thought, okay, well, he'll lead after a maximum of 2 laps and then comfortably go on to win this. It did not go that way. Opting for the medium tyre cost him in the sprint race, and then in the race itself, colliding with Lewis Hamilton, breaking his wing and having to try and battle through the pack, carrying that damage, led to a very fragmented and frustrating performance from the 2-time world champion. Although Verstappen's weekend did not end at the checkered flag. Because not only did the weekend not go according to plan on the track, the drivers also came to butting heads off of it as Max Verstappen was given orders to let Sergio Perez pass at the end of the Grand Prix, and just, well, didn't. Perez, who was incredibly frustrated by this, said after the Grand Prix that after all I've done for him is disappointing. I'm really surprised he has 2 world championships because of me. Also saying on the radio as he came across the line, it shows who he really is. Max in response said that he has his reasons as to why he didn't let Checo through, but Horner seemed to be having a stern word with Max after the Grand Prix finished and his team in the Red Bull hospitality section. As they chase their first ever championship 1-2, this is the first massive crack in the team dynamic, which looked to be really cohesive at Red Bull, and possibly Max getting a little bit too big for his boots. The problem they have is Max being their double world champion, record wins in a season, record points in a season. Do you think Max now thinks he's slightly bigger than the team? And what a Red Bull without Verstappen. With that being said, it seems like a really poor decision from my point of view, as Max might actually need the help from Perez next season, and that's definitely less likely to happen now. We'll have to see if they can help Sergio Perez in Abu Dhabi, as he now goes into the final race of the season equal on points with Charles Leclerc. Which leads perfectly into our next winners, which has to be Ferrari. 3rd and 4th for the team after the multiple setbacks they had this weekend. I think they will definitely take that. Leclerc and Ferrari made the strangest decision of the year, which is saying something when you're Ferrari, when in qualifying on the Friday, Charles Leclerc came out in Q3 on the intermediate tyres and needed it to rain basically as hard as it possibly could as soon as he hit the track. That didn't happen, so it was qualifying ruin for Leclerc, and then Carlos Sainz also had a 5-place drop for the race as he took his 6th ICE. 6. That is crazy. That is double the amount that you are supposed to use. It was looking like it was going to be another one of those weekends for Ferrari where it just all falls apart, even more so when Charles Leclerc was taken out by Lando Norris and in the wall after the first few laps of the Grand Prix. For them to finish 3rd and 4th from there is very, very impressive. The final safety car was a massive saving grace for the team as it allowed Sainz and Leclerc to get themselves back into the field and also battle their way past Sergio Perez as he was on the medium tyre, whereas both Ferraris were on the softs. They really needed it too. With Mercedes getting a 1-2, Leclerc now goes into the final race of the season equal on points with Sergio Perez in the driver's standings, and Ferrari keep a 19-point gap to Mercedes in the constructors, which could have been much, much smaller. The next loser really hurts me to say. It has to be McLaren. The race for 4th place is over, and I will never emotionally recover from this. I was so hopeful. Lando Norris qualified in 4th place in mixed conditions on the Friday. He narrowed the gap in the sprint race on the Saturday. There was a part of my heart that genuinely thought this is going to be the one. This is the weekend. And we'll look at Alpine's side of things momentarily, but the race itself for McLaren just went so wrong in so many different ways. It actually looked like it might be okay for a corner or two. Lando was on the inside of the Red Bulls at the start, and then after that, basically everything went wrong straight away. Let's pivot away from Lando Norris for a moment and talk about Daniel Ricciardo, who was edging towards the points after the sprint race and had an incredible Mexican Grand Prix he was building off of. Then he misjudges his braking, hits into the back of the man of the moment, Kevin Magnussen. There's like one person you didn't want to hit. The Haas is sent spinning, and then the Dane is completely out of control. Ricciardo tries to sneak past the out-of-hand Haas, but is clipped on the rear left tyre, and he was never going to be able to continue. Then Lando, not to feel left out, gets into a collision of his own. In a wheel-to-wheel battle with Charles Leclerc through turns 4 and turn 5, Norris dips his tyre onto the grass, bumps along, and ends up colliding with the Ferrari of Leclerc. Now, as I mentioned before, even though it was Charles Leclerc who was the one that ended up in the wall, the race ended up much better for the Monash man, because Lando Norris got handed a 5-second penalty, which massively dropped him down the order. Although, in the end, it didn't even matter, as he came to a stop on lap 52. That meant no points for the Papaya team, and any chance at 4th place in the Constructors' Championship is now completely gone. Which is actually good news for my 3rd and final winners in Alpine. They turned a weekend where the wheels genuinely looked like they were going to be falling off into one of the best finishes of the season. Even though it's Red Bull who have caught the most headlines for drivers falling out, the Alpine boys in Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso are also having an argument of their own. The sprint race was not easy to watch if you're a fan of the French team. First off, Ocon forces Alonso wide in turn 4, and then they collide. Alonso smacks into the back of Ocon and causes them to start 16th and 17th for the race. Not only that, but Ocon's car then catches fire in the pit lane whilst Alonso is spitting fire about his teammate in the media pen, and how he cannot wait to go to Aston Martin next year. To quote, "One more race and it's over, finally." As a McLaren fan, I was loving it. The team was falling apart. So how did they manage to go from that to finishing with Alonso in 5th place and Ocon in 8th place? That wasn't in the script. It went from Otmar having to come out and put the broken pieces of a team back together again to their 3rd best points haul of the season. They got a little bit lucky with safety cars at the right times, but that Alpine looks so quick, and Alonso may regret leaving this team because I think beating them to 4th place in the Constructors' Championship is going to be tough for anyone. Loser number 3 was actually pretty tough to decide on. All the teams that looked to be having bad weekends kind of turned it around, and all the teams who I didn't really expect much from didn't do too much. So I've gone a little bit left field, and I've gone for Drive to Survive as my final losers. Let me explain. Everyone in Formula 1 lost their minds following Kevin Magnussen's pole position lap in Brazil. None more so than the Haas garage, who absolutely erupted with emotion. As the clock ticked down and the rain fell harder and harder, the American team just went wild. It was Kevin Magnussen and Haas's first ever pole position in Formula 1, so the team going mad, drivers congratulating the team, and social media overflowing with memes of Gunther Steiner in celebration was all expected, but Steiner actually had one complaint. The drama drew the attention of Drive to Survive film crews, and Steiner wasn't too happy about it, saying they came in after Kevin Magnussen's pole. They always show up. They're like flies on... I think I've had enough with them this year. And Steiner actually complaining about them showing up is very, very bad news for the Drive to Survive team. Why? Because the Steiner-Haas episode is always the best episode. And if they push him away, then we won't get to see him climbing a mountain, or sitting in a little boat, or calling Gene. He is the lifeblood of the series, and Drive to Survive needs to be very careful that they don't annoy him too much, or we will lose our main character. Let's round out with a few honourable mentions. How I didn't fit Kevin Magnussen in as a winner, I know is criminal. A pole position, a point, doesn't get any better than that in a Haas. Bottas picking up a couple of points and sealing P10 in the championship is also a W for me. Whereas Sebastian Vettel has to be a loss. He was a sitting duck after that final safety car and dropped out of the points in the end. That just about rounds up my winners and losers from the Brazilian Grand Prix. It was an insane weekend all around and exactly what we needed to get us excited for 2023, even though we do still have Abu Dhabi left to go. Leave me a comment down below with your winners and losers. Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you next time.